had been on sabbatical for the last 4 months, so she's back at least. And I'm like, there's no way I'm doing that. Yeah. A little rough. Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you guys close down? Well, we don't. So it's a year by year change. Okay. So it's not like a guarantee. Okay. So how does it work? Every once in a while. Okay. Yeah, I had not like everywhere. I came down and I was like, we're not close. So this year, the new hires were like, we're open. I was like, yeah. I have not, even before we started to slow down. It's yeah. I haven't looked at it. Yeah. I'm not gonna, I may do a day. That's gonna be it.
Good to see you. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Good to see you. How are you? We're here. So excited.
Good to see you.
Okay, here we are. Maybe a few more folks on this side.
Come on. Go wherever you want.
Okay, maybe
Do a balance
you
here.
got a balance. Maybe need it. It's so funny. I was just close to wearing a green, but I was cold, so I put it around. Good morning, everyone. As you have probably observed, this is really a happy day for all of us, but for our country especially. So many people work so hard to make this possible over the, a couple of 100 years, as a matter of fact. So that makes this an historic day for the Congress and for the country as we pass H.R. 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act. Thank you, Congresswoman Terri Sewell, for your tremendous leadership, your relentless, your brilliance, and bring us all together to get this done with liberty and justice for all. I want to also salute Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, holding hearings from Alabama to Arizona. That scope is not alphabetical, but geographical on voting rights. Of course, we're here with our hero, John Lewis, and so many others, both at the grassroots level, and all of you at the grassroots level understand our inside maneuvering is essential to passing legislation, but it could never happen without the outside mobilization that you provide, both by dint of garnering support, but also being an intellectual resource to us as we go forward. Our Democratic majority came to Congress with an urgent promise to secure the sacred right to vote. It was part of H.R. 1, the first bill that we passed in the Congress. Because of some resistance on the part of some to reducing the role of money in politics, and we're still working on that, we split out H.R. 4 to have its own vote on the floor of the House. Action is urgently needed to combat the brazen voter suppression campaign that is spreading across America. Since Shelby versus Holder decision, 23 states have enacted voter suppression laws denying millions the right to vote. We must restore the strength of the Voting Rights Act. Nearly 55 years ago, speaking of the expanse of time, President Johnson stood on the House floor to urge passage of the Voting Rights Act. He said, "This is the first nation in history of the world to be founded with a purpose. All men are created equal." To protect that promise of equality, today we will pass H.R. 4. We call upon Senator McConnell to immediately bring the bill to the floor. Denying a vote on this bill would be denying millions of Americans justice. And now it is my great honor to yield the floor to the gentlewoman from Alabama who's made this part of her life's work in Congress, Congresswoman Terri Sewell.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is incredibly personal and special to me and my district. Alabama's 7th Congressional District that includes the cities of Birmingham, Montgomery, and my hometown of Selma, Alabama. You see, voting is very personal for me, not only because I represent America's Civil Rights District, but because it was on the streets of my hometown that foot soldiers like our incredible colleague, John Lewis, shed their blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge so that all Americans, regardless of race, could vote. Today, the House will finally pass H.R. 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act, to protect their legacy and restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I've introduced this bill for the past 3 Congresses, and I know you have on the Senate side too, Senator Leahy. But it really has been a group effort. For the past 6 years, I've been honored to have the support and input from so many wonderful stakeholders. The Leadership Council, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Lawyers Committee, AFL-CIO, the Brennan Center for Justice, Maldoff, and NALEO, just to name a few. Without this and these wonderful supporters, this bill would not be here today. The Supreme Court, yes. The Supreme Court's Shelby versus Holder decision gave states with a proven history of voter discrimination free rein to re-engage in suppressive voting processes. My state of Alabama, home to Shelby County, has implemented a more restrictive voter ID law and has the audacity to close nearly a dozen polling stations as well as DMVs since that decision. Alabama isn't alone. More than 24 states have enacted strict voter ID laws since 2013. State legislatures have worked to gerrymander districts, purge voter rolls, and reduce early voting. Today, as we pass H.R. 4, we protect the legacy of the foot soldiers of the voting rights movement, like our wonderful Congressman John Lewis. Ordinary, patriotic Americans who achieved extraordinary social change in the name of justice. To invoke the words of 103-year-old Amelia Boynton Robinson, who was also bludgeoned on that bridge in 1965, and who was my special guest in 2015 for the State of the Union as we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. She was often approached by so many people at 103, and they would always say the same thing: "We stand on your shoulders. We stand on your shoulders." And she, in her inimitable words, would often say, "Get off my shoulders. Do your own work," is what she would say. So on this wonderful day, as we pass H.R. 4, I want to invoke her words and say, "Miss Amelia, we're doing our own work. We're passing H.R. 4, and we're making sure that voter equality is alive and well in America today." I'd like to...
I know that you were about to bring on our champion in the Senate, Senator Leahy, but with your permission, Senator, we're so honored you're here. We want to keep you here longer. Our distinguished chair of the Judiciary Committee is managing the bill on the floor, so we're going to yield to him so he can get back to the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The right to vote is central to democracy and is foundational to the rule of law, but it is under constant threat in jurisdictions across the country today. When the Supreme Court gutted the preclearance requirements of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, it dismantled the central enforcement tool of that critical statute. What we have seen since that disastrous decision is a wave of voter suppression that only reinforces the need for restoring Section 5. The Supreme Court believed that the formula for determining which jurisdictions are covered by the preclearance requirements had not been sufficiently justified by current conditions. But it also invited Congress to update the formula. And H.R. 4, the bill we're considering today, does exactly that. The bill not only is responsive to current conditions, but it will also automatically update as conditions change. I want to thank the Speaker for her leadership in bringing this bill to the floor, as well as Congresswoman Sewell for crafting the legislation. As we documented exhaustively in the Judiciary and House Administration committees, there is continuing and pervasive discrimination in voting across the country that is undermining the fundamental right to vote for millions of Americans. It is essential that we pass H.R. 4 today, that it be enacted into law quickly, so that we can protect this sacred right for all Americans. Thank you.
It's pretty exciting that the debate is happening on the floor now in the House of Representatives, and so we're very pleased to welcome to the House side of the Capitol the distinguished gentleman from Vermont, Senator Leahy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And like all Vermonters, I'm very proud of you and what you're doing.
Thank you.
And Congressman Lewis was in Vermont recently. I have never seen anybody get the reception, John, that you got. It was a wonderful reception. One overflowing crowd after another as he spoke of what he went through and what we in Vermont have taken for granted on voting. I remember going as a child, I was 4 or 5 years old, with my parents when they'd go to vote, and you just assumed everybody could vote. But that's not happening. And, Madam Speaker, you will pass this bill today as the Senate's bill's lead author. I would call on Leader McConnell, bring the bill up. Do what the House has done. Show the leadership. Let us vote on it in the Senate and then see if anybody would vote no. It would pass the Senate. Let's pass it. Let's do our job. Let's respect everybody. You know, 54 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, voter suppression should be left to the history books, but it's alive and well today. Maybe the water cannons, the clubs, the police dogs may have been replaced, but they're replaced by bogus ID requirements, the purging of voter rolls, the changing of voter places. The tactics may have evolved, but the goal, don't forget the goal, state-sponsored, systematic disenfranchisement, it remains the same. So this legislation would undo the damage done by the Shelby County decision. It empower our citizens, all of them, to participate in our democracy. This is not a partisan thing. This is America. This is what my parents taught me as a child. You must vote. And if anybody thinks it's partisan, they need a civics lesson. You know, America is the governed who possess the power. They need not grab something that's already theirs. So we should not let it languish in the Senate's legislative graveyard. It's already supported in the Senate by 46 Democrats. Bring it to a vote. See if anybody would actually stand up and vote no. If it is allowed to come to a vote, it will pass overwhelmingly. Let us show the world that we not only talk about democracy, we practice and believe in democracy. So I appreciate all of you in doing this, and thank you for giving me a visa to come over to the House.
Those visas are usually reserved for former members of the House, because we really just can't stop them anyway. So this is a very special occasion that we have you, Senator Leahy.
And now my classmate from law school, Leader Hoyer.
15 times I have walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, most of those times holding John Lewis's hand. John, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The steps you took, the beatings you received, the courage you showed continues to illuminate our path today. Thank you, John Lewis. H.R. 4, the people. Whether you spell it F-O-U-R or you spell it F-O-R, this bill is for the people. This is a long overdue legislative response to the challenges confronting our country by the Supreme Court in 2013. Justice Ginsburg pointed out in her dissent in Shelby versus Holder that, and I quote, "Throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet." Think of that analogy. Indeed, as soon as that decision was released, we began to see in state after state a torrent of voter suppression, such as photo ID laws in Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, Arkansas, North Dakota, as well as a range of new restrictions on voting and registration in the states previously covered by preclearance. I am proud to, as Majority Leader, bring this bill to the floor. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor with all of my colleagues here. I am proud to work with Speaker Pelosi in making sure that we address this issue, which, as Senator Leahy said, is for America, for our principles, for the essence of democracy is that people vote and have their vote counted. Put an end to 6 years of renewed and rampant voter suppression, discrimination, and disenfranchisement. I urge, as Senator Leahy did, as Speaker Pelosi did, as all of us urge, take up this bill. You know, Reagan said, tear down this wall. Tear down this wall of discrimination. Tear down this wall of precluding people from registering. Tear down the wall of creating impediments to voting and encourage voting. Facilitate voting. Give Americans not only the right, but the ease and privilege of making sure their vote counts. And now let me yield to a colleague that I have known for over half a century, who himself, like John Lewis, deeply involved in the civil rights movement, an historic figure in his own right, Jim Clyburn, the Democratic Whip of the Congress of the United States. Jim?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Leader, Madam Speaker, Senator Leahy, my colleagues in the House, and all of our great stakeholders, and I don't know what else to call these people. Hillary, I got some other names I'm going to call you, but thank you so much. I'm standing here thinking back to my young days in 1966. My wife and I battled a driving rain from Charleston, South Carolina, going up to the little town of King Street that I proudly represent in this Congress today. We went there to hear Martin Luther King Jr. give one of his first speeches after the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It was a very rainy day. We were out in a cow pasture. I know it was a cow pasture. I saw evidence of it being a cow pasture. But we were there to hear Martin Luther King Jr. exalt, march to the ballot boxes. We in South Carolina had not done much marching to ballot boxes. I still remember my mother and father as young parents, young citizens, what they encountered trying to get the right to vote. We got it with the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and we have demonstrated it time and time again. But along the way, irrespective of the efforts of so many people, roads were not always made straight, as King exulted on that. There have been a lot of crooks in the roads. One came about 6 years ago when the Supreme Court took a look at the 1965 Voting Rights Act and decided that it was, for whatever reasons, outdated and needed to be made current. We took Justice Roberts' words to heart. Though we did not agree that it was outdated, we decided to do what we always do, and that is follow the law of the Supreme Court of the United States. And thanks to the Speaker, we had 8 hearings by the Judiciary Committee, 9 by a special committee that the leader of the Speaker created, headed by Marcia Fudge. They went around the country listening to people. And this bill is the result of those 17 hearings. And all the people here chimed in with their experiences and what they had developed. And it's all now been wrapped into one piece of legislation that will be put on the floor in a few minutes, and we are going to pass it. And so I want to say to Chief Justice Roberts and the Supreme Court, we listened, we heard, and we have acted in keeping with your instructions. And we call upon every member of the House, Democrat and Republican, to vote today to pass this bill. Every member of the Senate to pass this bill, and the President of the United States to sign it into law. And with that, I'm pleased to yield to my longtime friend who I met in 1960. Never forget the weekend, October the 13th, 14th, 15th, 1960. The weekend before Martin Luther King Jr. went to jail for the first time. John and I were there together, urging King to go to jail to show us the way. A great compatriot and a real patriot, John Lewis.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for your leadership, for your vision. Thank you for never, ever giving up, for keeping the faith, and for keeping your eyes on the prize. Jim Clyburn, my friend, my brother, this ongoing struggle to redeem the soul of America. We're not there yet. And there are forces in America today trying to take us back to another time and another place. But with the passage of this bill, we're saying we're not going back, we're going forward. The only thing I did or tried to do with a few other people is to get the right to vote. We gave a little blood on that bridge to help redeem the soul of America. Yes. So our struggle is an ongoing struggle. We can never give up. We can never lose hope. We're going to pass it here.
Yes.
Today. We're going to do it, Madam Speaker.
We're going to do it.
We're going to do it. And we're going to send it to the Senate. We must do it. The vote is the most powerful, nonviolent instrument or tool we have in a democratic society, and people should be able to use it, all of our citizens. So thank you very much.
John, great job.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Representative Sewell, congratulations and thank you. I can say with certainty that I would not be standing here and being a member of the House of Representatives if it hadn't been for the Voting Rights Act. I can say it with certainty that today's vote, when we pass H.R. 4, is a reaffirmation of our democracy, a reaffirmation of the fact that all of us, regardless, as citizens, have the right to participate in this democracy through voting, and that this democracy is inclusive and not selective. That's what the vote is about today. It's about acknowledging a history, but it's also about looking forward, as Representative Lewis said. I come from a state that was pre-clearance, Arizona. And after 2013 and the Supreme Court decision on Shelby, the floodgates opened across the country in terms of suppression. In Arizona, we're only second to Texas in terms of the closure of polling places across that state that affected disproportionately people of color and indigenous people in our state. Voting ID, a requirement. Voter roll purges. The moving of sites from one election to another. And the list goes on. And that level of suppression is what H.R. 4 addresses. It provides tools to protect the vote. It provides transparency for people to be able to fight these acts of suppression. And it provides accountability. That's what voting is about. And we should never be afraid of a full and healthy participation in this democracy of ours by the people. That's what keeps us healthy. To do it, to continue a pattern of denial of some people's right to vote is to continue a pattern of further destroying and undercutting this great democracy of ours. I'm proud and humbled to be here with the leadership today and to extend not only to the people that have had to endure the suppression, but to our country as well, that this vote today marks a departure from what has happened in the recent past. This is a vote to reaffirm our democracy and the right to reaffirm the right to vote regardless of every citizen in this country. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Vanita Gupta, President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a coalition of more than 220 organizations working toward an America as good as its ideals. Representing the many organizations that are here today that have toiled for years and decades to use every tool and tactic that we have to protect the right to vote. 6 years ago, when the Supreme Court ruled in Shelby County versus Holder, it gutted the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act that for decades had blocked racially discriminatory voting practices. And because of that decision, voter suppression has since proliferated nationwide. Today, our coalition is honored to support the Voting Rights Advancement Act, which repairs the devastating damage done by Shelby County, modernizes the Voting Rights Act, and restores the necessary tools to prevent voter discrimination. We thank Congresswoman Sewell, the House Judiciary Committee, the House Administration Committee, and Congresswoman Fudge, and the Democratic leadership for establishing a strong evidentiary record and shepherding this critical legislation through the House of Representatives. And we thank Congressman Lewis, who has shown us every day with his courage why any of us are here standing to fight for the very democracy that is most at stake for this nation. We have to ensure that every eligible voter can participate in the electoral process because our vote is our voice. H.R. 4 has been a top priority for the civil rights community because voting is derivative of every other right. During the civil rights movement, Congressman Lewis and other brave Americans gave their blood, some even their lives, for the right to vote. We cannot allow their legacy and the protections that they fought for to unravel. Our democracy depends on it, and we urge the House and then the Senate to restore the Voting Rights Act. The civil rights community will not rest until H.R. 4 becomes law. Thank you. And now I'll pass it to our sponsor legislature, Representative Sewell.
So I just want to say in closing a very big thank you to our leader, Speaker Pelosi, and also the leadership. I know that our North Star has been John Lewis, but I want to say to Whip Clyburn, thank you so much for the honor of working with you every day. I know so many of us walk the halls of Congress because of this legislation. And to say thank you, John, doesn't seem adequate. But I want you to know that we understand the legacy that has been passed on to us. We know we must continue to do our work, and we will do our work and make sure that H.R. 4 not only passes the House of Representatives, but it also passes the Senate and is signed into law. Thank you all. Let's keep up the fight. Let's know that it's a fight worthy of having. Thank you.
sorry. I know.